Hello, and welcome to our continuing journey through Judges in this month of July. And yesterday we were looking at the phenomenal story of Abimelech. Not a great story, didn't cover himself in glory really, and was very, very tragic in death as well. But now we're into double figures. We are heading towards chapter 21 is the last chapter, and after that, on the 25th of July, we're going to be meeting at St Matthew's Church in Willesden at 7:30 to discuss this book of Judges, and so we are almost halfway on our journey. Today is chapter 10. And this is Judges chapter 10. We're reading from the contemporary English version. Let's see what happens after Abimelech. The people have been following God and away from God, following God and going away from God. Let's see what happens next in this time of the Judges. Chapter 10. Tola was the next person to rescue Israel. He belonged to the Issachar tribe, but he lived in Shamir, a town in the hill country of Ephraim. His father was Puah, and his grandfather was Dodo. Tola was a leader of Israel for 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shamir. The next leader of Israel was Jair, who lived in Gilead. He was a leader for 22 years. He had 30 sons, and each son had his own mule and was in charge of one town in Gilead. Those 30 towns are still called the settlements of Jair. When he died, he was buried in the town of Kamon. Before long, the Israelites began disobeying the Lord by worshipping Baal, Astarte, and the gods from Syria, Sidon, Moab, Ammon, and Philistia. The Lord was angry at Israel and decided to let Philistia and Ammon conquer them. So the same year that Jair died, Israel's army was crushed by these two nations. For 18 years, Ammon was cruel to the Israelites who lived in Gilead, the region east of the Jordan River that had once belonged to the Amorites. Then the Ammonites began crossing the Jordan and attacking the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. Life was miserable for the Israelites. They begged the Lord for help and confessed, "We are unfaithful to you, our Lord. We stopped worshipping you and started worshipping idols of Baal." The Lord answered, "In the past, when you came crying to me for help, I rescued you. At one time or another, I've rescued you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Moabites. But I'm not going to rescue you any more. You've left me and gone off to worship other gods. If you're in such big trouble, go cry to them for help." "We have been unfaithful," the Israelites admitted. "If we must be punished, do it yourself, but please rescue us from the Ammonites." Then the Israelites got rid of the idols of the foreign gods, and they began worshipping only the Lord. Finally there came a time when the Lord could no longer stand to see them suffer. The rulers of Ammon called their soldiers together and led them to Gilead, where they set up camp. The Israelites gathered at Mizpah and set up camp there. The leaders of Gilead asked each other, "Who can lead an attack on the Ammonites?" Then they agreed, "If we can find someone who can lead the attack, we'll make him the ruler of Gilead." And that's the end of chapter 10. That's a real duff moment, isn't it? We're going to have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happens as they take on the Ammonites. But again, this great story of coming to God, going back to God. I think the thing that really struck me about it today was that the length of time that these things take. So 23 years for Tola, 22 years for Jair, and people going to and from God. It's not a case of being close to God in a year, or even being close to God in a month or a week, having a good week of walking with God, and a bad week of walking with God, as it were, or away from God. But it's the way that these things take such long times, and the way that the patterns move in such slow cycles, really, just making me realise that it's over our lifetime, really, that our journey with God has its little ups and downs over days and hours, even mornings and afternoons, and we can have times walking with God and away from God, but it's kind of that longer journey. Where is it heading? That's a good question to ask, I think. And And the way as well that God, even though he sounds very petulant, doesn't he? Well, I'm not going to rescue you anymore. If you want to be rescued, go to the gods you've run away from me to go to. He does sound quite human in that. We can really recognise that emotion. But then I love the way that it says that that finally there came a time when the Lord could no longer stand to see them suffer. So he was really drawn to pity and drawn to mercy, and his love was unchanging. Even though he'd said what he'd said, he still cared so much for the people of Israel. Fantastic reading. A short chapter today, but still a fascinating chapter. A lot in it, and we covered quite a few years there as well. And come back tomorrow, find out what happens in chapter 11 when we do indeed strike the second half of our Judges journey. Have a really lovely day today. All the very best. God bless. Bye bye.